I just wanted to. I don't know if y'all saw the email that Sister Kofa had sent out saying that whoever has the mic should be the only one with the mic open. Everybody should mute out their mic. That way you don't get as much background noise. And so whoever has the floor would unmute their mic.
That'll work.
Cool.
Okay. Right. Okay.
Do you want to go ahead and direct it then, Bryce?
I can go ahead and do that. That's totally fine. All right, guys. So I apologize for the stress and everything. Oh boy, it's been stressful. Okay, so let's just I have somewhere to be in a half hour, so I'm gonna try and make this quick. So let's just start with question 1 on the application activity. If someone wants to, is there someone that wants to briefly explain the health model or give us like an overview of what it means to them? Just kind of go over their paragraph that they wrote down. All right, I can't speak. Anyone in particular?
I mean, yeah, I can.
All right. Okay, thanks, Megan.
Like, okay, no one else. All right, so summarize the health belief model, right? So the health belief model is just a type of model that can be used to drive an intervention. I learned that in my program planning class. It's super important that the models always drive the intervention. And so specifically the health belief model is health seeking, and it has different constructs, which are perceived susceptibility, perceived severity, perceived benefits of an action, perceived barriers to taking that action. And so before I dive into the different constructs, it's known as a value expectancy model, which means it's like the assumption that people will engage in health behavior if, 1, they value the outcome, which is being healthy, related to the behavior, and then 2, they think that the behavior is likely to result in that outcome. So the different constructs, perceived susceptibility is the degree to which a person feels at risk or for a health problem. Perceived severity is the seriousness of contracting an illness or leaving it untreated. Perceived benefits, the positive outcomes a person believes will result from the action. And perceived barriers, the negative outcomes a person believes will result in the action. And then it also involves like cue to action and like self-efficacy, which we talked about in a different lesson, which is a person's belief in his or her ability to take action. So essentially like that's what makes up the health belief model.
Awesome. Thanks, Megan.
I'm sorry, did we discuss the various stages, the constructs, the perceived susceptibility, perceived severity?
We're going to, you're jumping ahead, Alan. We're going to go into that next.
I'm sorry. My fault.
No worries. No worries. If you want to take the first one, Alan, and explain like the perception, the perceived, I can't speak.
So it's the perceived susceptibility. And so
yes.
Perceived susceptibility refers to the beliefs about the likelihood of getting a disease or condition. So basically, you know, in the example that we were given about the tattoos, so we would have to basically take our target population and explain to them and instill the understanding of why the target population is at risk. You know, whatever behavior that it is, in that case, it was referring to the tattoos and just all of the health issues that come along with that. And so they go further to give us another example. So, for instance, it says a woman must believe there's a possibility of getting breast cancer before she will be interested in obtaining a mammogram. And so that was kind of the definition of the perceived susceptibility. There was also a chart that showed how that perceived susceptibility could be applied. And so the example that they said was like define the population at risk and the person's individual increase of risk, more consistent with an individual's personal risk. I hope that is clear for everybody.
That was awesome. Thanks, Alan. Does anyone want to take severity? Any volunteers for severity?
So from what I understand from severity, so what I know about like interventions and stuff like that is that when we perceive something as, okay, so thinking about tuberculosis or things like that, in order for people to want to get checked out, or back then when it was like a real issue, people would have to know enough information and realize that being checked for tuberculosis is more beneficial to them than getting actually sick, or it not progressing into something more severe. And so if something's too severe, then it kind of backfires, because then there's no real intent to change a behavior because it's already too late. But if it's severe enough where a behavior can change and make a difference, then it's more than likely going to help the person change their health behaviors. At least that's from kind of like what I understood from it. I don't know if that's exactly correct. Yes, you correct me.
That sounds good to me. I mean, that's what I
also wanted to add one thing that that would help. I think that create the greater perception. So when you take the perceived susceptibility and then you combine it with the perceived severity, that gives that's labeled, that basically the combination of the two is labeled as the perceived threat. So hopefully that will help.
Okay, that is awesome. That's the severity. That's the perceived benefits. For me, the understanding that I had of the perceived benefits is it's the benefits of not, of like, it's like the pros and cons. It's the difference between, it's the pros of the benefits that are supporting it and then the cons that are against it. And the benefits of both was what I understood of that. If anyone has a different understanding, feel free to enlighten us and help us understand that better. But if anyone wants to, if the next person wants to take, go ahead, Burley.
Right. Okay, thanks. For me, I just understood it as kind of they all go along together, and the severity, perceived severity is like, perceived benefits is like, let's say you have this disease and you have to change in order to get more healthy. Well, how does it benefit you in doing that so that you will be that way? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Sorry if I keep on cutting out. I am almost to the hospital and I am very distracted.
No worries. I'm just glad you're here.
And so just kind of elaborate on what Amberly was saying, is that it's the perceived benefits. You want to be able to understand what actions to take. They define it as the who, the what, the where, the why, to clarify the positive effects that are to be expected from their effort.
Okay. Who wants to take barriers? Remember that with barriers, it's also like identifying the barriers that develop the intervention or the target population. So the barriers that are involved is what I understood.
Wait, so what do you mean by that? So the barriers to the intervention that we...
So the perception of barriers is like, what I understood of it all was that when you have a barrier, it's something that blocks you from like getting to the point that you want. And so in an intervention, if you're perceiving the barriers, then you're going to help that person get over their barriers. Like, for example, with like someone that has an issue with smoking, like their barriers are going to be their triggers that trigger them to smoke.
Right.
And so you're going to help them try and walk them through past their barriers.
Right.
Rather than identifying the barriers that they have.
Yes. Sorry, I thought you were asking a different question as well. So.
Oh, no.
Okay, so I misunderstood that, but yeah, exactly how you explained it. You explained that perfectly. Also on the PowerPoint, it says the negative outcomes a person believes will result from the action. So that can also be a barrier, is their perception of the negative benefits and the negative outcomes.
Mm-hmm. And there's actually, I wish I could post it, but there's a link to a Quizlet that someone has that has all these flashcards that go over each individual one and gives you like a definition of all. I don't have the link.
Oh, so I just wanted to add for that, the barriers. I also think that for the people that are doing the interventions, like the professionals, it's probably helpful for them to understand what we're thinking, the barriers that they are facing, because it might not necessarily be what the person as a professional has faced in their own lives. And so by looking at what their lives are like and things that they perceive as barriers, that could better help them make an intervention for them. And
I completely agree with what you're saying, and I think that also has to kind of be reflective of the accurate assessment that we do for the target population, being able to understand the barriers that are enable us, health promotion specialists, to be able to target and to be able to design the program to be able to overcome barriers.
Okay. So with barriers covered, what is the what would be our cue to action? What is the definition of cue to action?
Sorry guys. I'm it hurts to talk. I'm super sick tonight.
Well, I mean,
and I'm driving, but
I don't mind defining it, Nicole. It's clear that you're sick. I don't want you to, you can sit back and be in the passenger seat. No worries.
This is awful.
Yeah, no. Relax. Go ahead. I mean, I don't mind. Talking about cues to action.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, no. So the various the early formulations in the model included the concept of cues that can trigger actions. Okay, so for example, it's the thought that readiness to take action. To be able to be ready, to be able to, I think that has to kind of go back to the self-efficacy aspect of it, being able to have confidence in what we're doing, and confidence in the target population to be able to identify what they need to do to be able to get to where they want to go. There's a lot of people that have an understanding of where they want to be, but they don't know how to get there. So I think as self-promotion specialists, that's our job also, is to be able to walk them along, to be able to get to where they want to go, to be able to identify, we've already identified the behavior modification that we want to implement. So it's about how we are going to be able to take the target population and get them to where they want to go. And so the further example it also says provide the how-to information, promote awareness, and it uses appropriate reminder systems, being able to have the proper network, that would enable everybody, as a whole, to allow the target population to get to where they want to go. They want to be around people that are going to continue to, promote the choices that they're making. Does that make sense for everybody?
Makes sense to me.
Okay, because I could be just rambling on. So,
no, you're good, Alan.
Cool. Just make sure everybody's good. All right, cool.
Okay. The last one is the self-efficiency. So the last one is self-efficiency. Does someone have like a fabulous definition of that one that they would like to share?
So essentially, it's just the person's belief in his or her ability to take action or complete an action or succeed in something. So that's what self-efficacy is.
That's what that is. Sorry.
No, you're good. So that's Yeah, I mean, I don't know how else to say it besides it's just someone's belief that they can accomplish something or not accomplish something.
Okay.
So,
Does anyone know if these have a time limit? Now that I'm asking.
if what has a time limit?
Are we supposed to have a specific time limit on these things?
This time I don't see on the relevance instructions that it's supposed to be a certain amount of time. So I think that we can probably wrap it up in 12 minutes so that you can go. But I think that we need to discuss the quote at least and discuss the scenario study. And then I think we'll be good. Because then the third part is the application assignment prep, which we're supposed to just start on the application together. But I think we can skip that and we can just discuss the quote and discuss the case study. And then I think we'll be good.
All right. So let me find the is that then?
The case study was the tattoo scenario, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
That's kind of a hard, you know, like the instructions said to be able to remove ourselves from the personal outlooks or the personal, you know, perspectives that we have. Well, I've got a few tattoos, and so that was kind of hard for me to identify with. But you know, ultimately, we've got to be able to paint the picture for our target population to be able to understand that tattoos come with an inherent risk. You know, whether you know the of course everything is clean nowadays, but ultimately you're worried about, you know, the disease that could be, you know, picked up in the tattoo parlor. Whatever, I mean, there's, you know, the before you had to worry about, you know, possibility of sharing the same tattoo gun or something along those lines. So I think that in order we have to be able to identify what the inherent risks are to be able to allow those individuals to understand, you know, like that their choices come with the associated risks.
For sure.
Also,
yeah, go ahead, Amberly.
Sorry.
No, go for
just
it.
to my understanding, I kind of made it sound like they were a group of high school students, and I mean, I don't know. I graduated 2 years ago, but the same type of similar situation was happening in my high school, and a lot of my friends were getting tattoos, and they didn't really think about the risks or think about what could have happened, and they just mostly thought, well, like, oh, peer pressure, and also everyone else is doing this, so I should do it too. And they didn't really go through all the steps,
right?
If that makes sense.
No, it does. It does. I also think that, like, so if I'm not mistaken, hepatitis was something that was inherent risk of having a tattoo. So I not only do I have a tattoo, but I also have a brand, and so you know, those just in general, I think that, and if we're going to go back to the gospel, we have to think about the fact that, you know, that our bodies are temples, and so we're supposed to be able to respect and promote healthy aspects for our bodies, right? We're not supposed to defile it. Our bodies are on loan, right? And so if we're going to take the gospel principle and the gospel perspective, then that's what we have to be able to. I don't know that we can apply that to just a target population. You know, hopefully that we'd be able to implement some aspect of the gospel, but I think that might be a little bit more challenging, actually. Anybody else?
I mean, that's what the case study is talking about, is like the health risks, but right. I kind of think of like other aspects as well, because in the future you have to think of working, right? I've heard that sometimes, I don't know how it is like nowadays, but I've heard like sometimes in certain jobs, if you have tattoos that are shown and on your body, then you won't get hired for the job, or you're less likely to be hired over someone else.
And that's funny that you say that, Megan, because when I have a tattoo on my chest and on my arm and the brand on the arm, but the choices that I have where I had put them was for that reason, that these are for my person, you know, these are personal, you know, it's not for the public to see. And so it does that. You have to be able to have a degree of professionalism, you know, although a lot of people are more lenient and acceptable of that nowadays.
Right.
Hey,
But
sorry.
a teenager isn't probably thinking about that.
Sorry to cut you guys off. I have to go see my dad right now,
Okay.
but he's the one that's at the hospital. But can I like email you guys?
Yeah.
And see what I missed.
Of course.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everybody that's here,
Take the
you know,
time you need, Amberly. Seriously.
Yeah. Grateful for your participation. Thank you. I hope everything goes well for your dad.
Thank you.
Yeah. Praying for your dad.
Okay. I will see you guys next week then.
All right, you bet.
Okay, bye.
And so, you know, yeah, you know, also, I don't want to get too deep in the gospel conversation, but I feel like that, you know, that just kind of shows how much, you know, how much society is becoming more secular is because they have, you know, become more acceptable. You know, these things are more acceptable now. You know, not that I don't want to pass judgment on. Like I said, I have a couple tattoos in a brand, but you know, ultimately, I also chose, you know, not to have these things presentable. You know, that they're not going to infringe on my opportunity to be able to be gainfully employed. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I think at that age when teenagers get tattoos, they're not thinking of all the things. All they're thinking is like, hey, it's a cool thing to do. All my friends have it, and kind of a showcase of rebellion. So real quick, the quote, as it says, underage youth get tattoos either to rebel against parents or be accepted by peers. As a health educator, you have to put aside your own feelings about the circumstances in order to work with the target population. So it says, read and discuss the following quote. It says, peer and parental influences compete and often conflict. As youth approach early adulthood, they decide upon ways they wish to present themselves to others and count the cost of doing so by gauging the reactions they get. Attendant to this process as psychosocial risks and rewards. For example, the choice between acceptance by peers and rejection by parents and other authority figures factors into the decision-making process for behavior in general. We imagine this to be more consequential when individuals contemplate getting something as permanent as a tattoo.
All right. So I think that you know, in terms of where we're going to go, what we should discuss as far as the case study is concerned is that, of course, we need to bring in, you know, the health belief model. And so, you know, the perceived susceptibility, then that's when we would identify what the individual risks are. It wouldn't be as much identified as like health risks as opposed to, I think the greatest risk would be the inability to be able to become gainfully employed based on these, you know, these representations of whatever choice, you know, defiling or whatever the case may be, you know, the rebellion, whatever, you know, the acceptance, but just ultimately, I guess, the repercussions that would come about from those choices. I think that because the health risk really isn't as perceived anymore, other than like the hepatitis aspect of it, I think that the greatest thing would be the being able to paint what those tattoos would do to them for later on in life. Would y'all agree?
I would totally agree. I think when we talked about like the perception of barriers early on, I think peer and parental influence is definitely a huge barrier, which I loved with reading the quote. I was like, okay, well, that's totally right. That's totally the barriers I was thinking of, because again, all my friends are doing it is the classic phrase that everyone knows. Right. But I mean, if we can go through and you can break down those barriers and say, well, why are you really doing this? Is it just because so-and-so does it? And then the classic, well, if so-and-so does that, does that mean if so-and-so jumps off a cliff, will you jump off a cliff with them? I don't know, that's the wrong idea. But
so I agree, Bryce, with what you're saying. So, but so we would have to paint the perceived severity, you know, of course, what the actual consequences would be of them making those choices. And then, of course, the benefits, that would be easy, you know, being able to I don't want to. I don't want to say this in the wrong context, but you know, being able to be respectable and being able to be presentable. You know, I think that is the perceived benefit. And then,
Absolutely.
of course, the barriers, like you were saying, is that the various, you know, the social barriers, you know, and so, yeah, then the cues to action would be, how would we be able to get them to make those choices? You know, what avenues, you know, how would we bring that target population who is on the fence, whether to be rebellious or to be socially accepted, how would we get them to travel down the avenue of choosing not to defile their bodies?
Exactly.
Anybody?
I think that, especially for young people, I think that sometimes they don't stop to think even of the health risks, like just mentioned before. But like, I just think of my little niece, and she's like, I love her, but sometimes she makes like the dumbest decisions ever, and she's so young. And I think she probably wouldn't consider like, hey, if my parent doesn't let me do this, and if I go do this behind their back or whatever, and I don't do this properly, where I know that the needles are properly sanitized, or the place is properly sanitized, or the ink won't cause me an infection or blood poisoning, or all this other stuff, where things are more regular, like are more like screened and stuff, but young people are not necessarily smart about it, and especially if their parents don't agree, they might not do things the right way and get it by a professional. And I think for the social aspect, I think like what you guys were saying, a lot of it is like, oh, my friend is doing this and this looks cool, so I don't really care what my parents think, or I don't really care if
I think,
anything.
You know, just in what you and Bryce were saying, and so that also makes me think that in order for our program to be successful, I feel like that we got to turn the doorbell off. And so no, in order for our program to be successful, we have to remove that element of rebellion, so that we have to make that clear. You know, if we take that off of the table, the rebellious aspect, then they can't. That I think that's one less barrier that we have to worry about. You know what I mean? And so if we can convince our target population that it's not about rebellion against their parents, I think that would increase our effectiveness.
Yeah, I agree. And also maybe somehow turning the table and like making it the uncool thing, that would be so hard to do. But
I agree completely.
So hard to do, but it would be so worth it in the end, right? All right. I hate to cut it short, but I have to run. Megan, are you okay to post a link? Because I apparently didn't know what I was doing today.
You are just fine. It's a little bit tricky, and I've been doing online classes for a while now, so I know.
See, I've done it, but they've all used the Adobe. Is how they've done it.
Yeah.
I've never used Google Hangouts ever.
Oh, yeah. They just always done Google Hangouts, so I had to figure it out. So, but really, it's not a big issue whatsoever. I don't care. It literally takes 2 minutes to set up.
Okay. So if you'll post the link and the relevance and everything like that, I will post the attendance underneath your link separately. And then who wants to take over next week?
I'll do it next week, since I did not participate much this week.
No, you're good.
I'll
you're
be
good.
better next week.
You're a full participant. Everybody that was here is a full participant. So that's very good. Yeah.
And again, I
know how to record it, so I can start it.
Okay. All right, Nicole, it's all you.
Emails. Do you want to just start it then, Megan?
Yeah, I can just start it, and then you can lead the discussion.
Hello.
All right, Bryce. Thanks, brother.
No problem. Thanks, guys. Thanks for being so understanding. I'm sorry it was so stressful getting on.
No worries. No worries.
Good. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Good night, guys.
Hey.
Bye.
Megan, are we done? Okay. Hey, we need to for next week. We need to make sure that they